find a seat. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Really appreciate the great turnout. We're going to be, I apologize for the lack of a normal registration desk. My excuse, if I have one, is that I did fly in last night for the seminar, and the very, very organized person who is my co-chair is currently sitting on a beach in Mexico. So I will be, my friend Jim from RBC is printing out the list and we'll be passing it around. And if you wouldn't mind just checking off your name that you've attended, and then if you're not on the list, if you can just write in your name at the bottom. We're going to do it old school, but appreciate that because we do like to know who comes out to these events. On that note, I would like to introduce some of our sponsors of this event, just to come up and say a few words. I think I'd like to start with the organization that sort of spearheaded and inspired this, which is the Southern Ontario Regional Association, SORA, of the Statistical Society of Canada, and also the American Statistical Association. Hugh, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Allison. Just to reiterate a few points and add to what Allison's mentioned already. First, I'd like to say good evening. Great to be with you. Again, my name is Hugh McCaig. I'm the secretary of SORA. And SORA is short for the Southern Ontario Regional Association of the Statistical Society of Canada, and also the Southern Ontario chapter of the American Statistical Association. More information, including membership information, is available through the sorataba.org website, or simply do a web search using the keywords SORA and Ontario. Part of the purpose of SORA is to promote in the broadest manner statistics, biostatistics, and business analytics in Southern Ontario. This purpose is where this evening's event comes in. The co-chairs of the SORA Business Analytics Seminar Committee is Allison Burnham and Katie Tingley. On behalf of the Executive Committee of SORA, I would like to extend our great thanks to Allison and Katie Tingley and other members of the organizing committee of the Business Analytics Seminar. These events are a great service for educating us, fostering our professional development, and make contacts for the advancement of our careers. Thank you.
We are also clearly very, very lucky to be sponsored by Royal Bank of Canada. They give us this lovely location as well as helping us with a lot of advice, and there's a lot of synergy between the two organizations. So I'd like to introduce you to Jim.
Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to welcome you to RBC Water Park Place for tonight's SORA event. My name is Jim Miller. I'm a member of RBC's Tech Community Engagement Team. We're also known as Future Makers. There we go on the sign. Did you know that RBC is not just a bank? We've got 11,000 tech employees. These are people who don't work in branches, don't sell you products or services over the phone. These are our computer programmers, business analysts, data scientists, the people who manage the technology that makes RBC the largest bank in Canada, one of the top largest banks in the world. We're the largest tech company in Canada. In fact, the only enterprise of any type that has more tech employees than RBC is the Canadian federal government. So if you're interested in working at RBC, we are hiring data scientists and data engineers. You probably saw my little setup out by the main door when you came in. If you're interested in knowing more about job opportunities at RBC, I'm not in the recruiting department, so I'm not going to hard sell you on applying. But I will give you some information that you can share with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors. About what we do here at RBC, so that you might maybe come and attend some of the other events that we run in this facility. I'd like to thank Allison and Katie Tingley for partnering with us and the RBC Future Makers program on this informative series. RBC is committed to helping build Canada's digital future, including the advancement of data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and much more. And I hope you enjoy the panel that you're going to hear this evening. Thank you.
And our last sponsorship blurb is a company called Environics Analytics that have been sponsoring this seminar since it started.
Thank you, Allison. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Kai. I'm from Environics Analytics. We are a marketing analytics company based in Toronto, serving Canada and the United States. We provide databases, software, and consulting services in a variety of industries, including finance, retail, real estate, telecommunications, energy, automotive, government, non-for-profit, and many more. We help our clients, whether they're businesses, governmental agencies, or nonprofit organizations, to gain insights about the people whom they serve using data or analytics. One of the speakers tonight is Richard Boyer, who is a senior vice president in our company. So you will learn more about our work through his presentation. If you have any questions about our company's work, about our data products, software, or consulting services, please feel free to ask me, ask Richard, or ask anybody else from our company. We'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. One last announcement, and then I will start our the main event. So we have an exciting lineup of 5 seminars planned for this year. They're supposed to be quarterly, but this year we have 5. There's going to be 4 here at Royal Bank, and we have one special seminar, which is the next one coming up around the end of March, that's going to be held at Ryerson. So it's in conjunction with the Ryerson Marketing Department. So we will be, please stay tuned for more details in your email about that seminar. It will be a bit more marketing focused. We'll be back here again then in May and September and November for seminars. So also, you know, we are always looking for speakers and people to get involved. So please feel free to let me know if you're interested in being more involved in the seminar. Thank you very much. And with that, I'd love to get us started. If our would mind coming up to speak, that would be great. I'm going to make them actually introduce themselves. So. I guess we all get the, I'll sit on the end one maybe. Yeah. Everyone check your microphones. Well, you can check them, I guess, when you introduce yourself. Okay. So we're going to start with Fernando.
Yes, good evening. My name is Fernando Camacho. I'm a statistician, graduated from Western University, worked for many years together with Allison and Ontario Power Generation. And then I became an independent consultant and I joined the University of Waterloo as a special lecturer. That's me.
And Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Peters. I'm a partner in Deloitte. I've got been there about 7.5 years. I'm an econometrician by training. Don't hold that against me. But have been a lifer in the consulting business, applying analytics to various problems. So happy to be here tonight and talk to you about those experiences.
And Richard.
I'm Richard Boire, Senior Vice President of Environics Analytics. I've been at this, like Tom, I've been at this industry and been in data science since the mid '80s. I started when I was 6, so I'm supposed to laugh. You know, it's my attempt at humor. But anyways, I'll just say one thing is that I've been very blessed in terms of like being exposed to all the different types of business problems and industry sectors, and it's been a lot of fun in the 30 years that I've been at it.
Jillian?
Hi, I'm Jillian Engel. I work at a small consultancy called Data Insight Group, where I'm a senior consultant and project lead. I've been in the analytics space for a decade or so, and in a variety of roles. I specialize in financial services, mainly on the customer and marketing analytics side.
Great, thank you. So the first question I had for the panel was, what do you enjoy most about analytics consulting? So what gets you out of bed and out to do your job? So anyone who wants to take that one? Go ahead, Richard.
I guess the number one thing that really charges me is the different problems that we're exposed to, and that could be even within a given company. And trying to use information, and in some cases, it's being very creative with the information, not fraudulent or falsifying, but actually being intelligently using information. Because one of the things that was ingrained upon me is that perfection is the enemy of the good. And as a data scientist, you have to remember that if you're always trying to strive for perfection, you're never going to get anything done. But again, it's the number of different business problems that I've been exposed to, as well as being very fortunate working with with great clients who you collaborate with, and who really want to work with you to solve, to get to the end solution.
Anyone else? Tom?
Yeah, I'd pile on Richard's comment about the variety, but I have to say it's only 4 words. We chose your proposal.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's intoxicating to hear those words when you've spent weeks or months pulling together an approach to a problem that you get, the variety of which happens. Every project's different in the consulting space. Clients, even if they're the same, their problems are different. So you get a chance to put together an approach, and typically not cookie cutter. Sometimes you can reuse stuff, but a lot of the time you have to come at things differently, and that's really the excitement. And then when that culminates with those 4 words, you're validated to a certain extent.
What sort of backgrounds do all of you have? Because one thing I've noticed over the years is that there's no such thing as a data scientist or an analytics person. We come, like an engineer, probably graduated from engineering, but analytics is a little different. So maybe everyone could just sort of say a bit about that.
Well, I started my career as an engineer. I graduated with an electrical engineer degree, but pretty soon I started doing statistics. That my first job was doing statistics. So I decided to do postgraduate work in statistics. And then today, most of my work is in the medical field. So it's funny how I started in one area in engineering, and now I end up in medicine, basically doing a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies. So I think what I found over the years is not that important your first degree or your second degree, is your ability to adapt and learn whenever you work with different clients. And I've been very fortunate to work with many different people in many different fields. And one of the things that I also learned is that they are willing to educate you if you are willing to learn, because they want to solve the problems. And a better way to do that is for them to help you to solve the problems.
Thank you. Tom?
Oh, we're gonna
Yeah,
go
yeah,
right down?
yeah.
Yeah, I think the background I have, I'm an economist by training, specialized in econometrics when I did my PhD. And I taught for 8 years. So right out of school, I really didn't have a real job until about 8 years later. And the yearning desire to actually apply the stuff I was teaching was a big deal. Instead of throwing together examples and cases to make second-year business students go, wow, which was really hard, was starting to weigh heavy. So I took an opportunity to join a startup, believe it or not. I gave up tenure and I walked away and joined a company of about 5 people. They had a unique value proposition in what they were doing at the time. This is 1995, so those of you who were working back then, the internet didn't really exist. There was bulletin board things that you could post stuff to when you're not sure anybody looked at it or saw it. But the end of the day, what was interesting about my career is I took that opportunity and was able to start applying the trade that I had learned, and I got lucky. I hit a company that really had some legs. We had some interesting value proposition. We worked all over the world, from Australia, Europe, US, Canada, and it was intriguing. So take the opportunities when they come along, and you never know where it's going to come from. I didn't practice economics per se, like in the public sector or anything like that. It was literally the application of economic principles in marketing, product development, and business.
Very cool. What was the company, if you don't mind sharing?
Advanus. It still exists. It's
Yeah.
a market research company based out of Edmonton and got
Okay.
an office in Toronto.
Very cool. Richard.
Yeah, I was hearing Tom speak. My journey was certainly not linear as well. I graduated with the Bachelor of Science in Physiology and Biochem. I was thinking about medicine at one time, but I worked in a hospital one summer, and that kind of dissuaded me. I then did an MBA where I graduated in statistics and finance. And I remember looking for work. I'd done my research paper. This was in Concordia University in Montreal. I did a research paper on how the bond rating industry was inconsistent in setting aside bond ratings. So, I got a very good mark. Professor gave me an A+. I was going to I went to the bond rating industry to try and get a job. But lo and behold, I'm being critical of the bond rating industry, didn't get a job. So I went back to the job board at the Concordia and looked, and I saw this job for direct marketing at Reader's Digest. So that's where the journey began. But I got great business experience and direct marketing experience, but I didn't know how to code. I could, because you're saying, okay, how did you become a data scientist? Well, I didn't become a data scientist when I was in Montreal. It was the next job where I joined American Express. And my boss said to me, he was heading up the direct marketing department, he said, you can't go to IT anymore and get them to do what you want them to do to get results. He said, you're going to have to learn how to program. And at that time, R and Python weren't around, it was SAS. So I learned how to program in SAS. And I just remember, when I wrote my first program, it was this epiphany and this moment of empowerment where I could actually take data from disparate sources and put it together. Like for me, I had found my calling, and I was in my 30s when I found my calling. I said, that's what I want to do. So that's kind of my journey, and the rest is kind of,
Yeah.
history, so to speak.
Lovely. Jillian?
So I did my undergraduate in business with a specialty in finance and economics. And so it was doing econometrics that I discovered my love for analytics. Before that, I thought I wanted to be an investment banker.
Oh.
I don't know. It was a terrible idea. So when I finished school, most of my, summer work experience while I was a student was actually in sort of project management in marketing communications. So I managed to get a project coordinator job within a small sort of PMO within an analytics group.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of started getting my tentacles in there, and then just proved my worth as an analyst. And within 10 months, I was leading their retail sales analytics. So, and then I just kind of went from there.
Oh, cool. So as you look back, and I know, Fernando, that you actually work with graduate students and undergraduates to teach them consulting skills. Do you have a few words of what the main things are that you try to pass on to them as you're looking at someone who's going to start that sort of career?
Yeah, one of the things that I mentioned a lot to my students is you have to work also in the we call the soft skills. As you go to the programming stats, and you're very good at doing regression models, fitting models, working with data. But when it comes to communication, a lot of the students are struggling with that. It's not only the interpersonal relationship, but also to be able to properly write a report or properly sit down with your client and find out exactly what is the problem that they have. Because you don't want to solve what we call it, you don't want to have a type 3 error to solve the incorrect question. So we do a lot of emphasis in the course that I teach in consulting on communication skills. And what is interesting, I recently saw a video put by the American Statistical Association, which also stresses the importance of communication skills. these soft skills that many of the graduate students don't like, especially in the math area, but it's very important if you want to become a successful consultant.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts of advice they'd pass on to somebody starting this kind of career? Go ahead.
I'll jump in. I think it also depends on at what stage in their career they want to start something like this. For students, I think you're right on the nose on the communication side. Technical skills like coding and things like that are becoming table stakes. If you want to be in analytics and you want to be on the technical side of analytics, coding is table stakes. In the consulting business, you have to combine those two. Not everybody can do it. There's certain people type, not everybody wants to do it either. Those who prefer to run models until the cows come home to try and get that extra level of lift or reduced variance and so on are, want to stay in that world. We would call those folks the kind of red skill people. And I'll use a bit of Deloitte silly terminology, but there's then on the blue side is those kind of business skills and the communication side. How do you translate those things coming out of the technical side into business outcomes? And it's not just insights. Those insights have to mean something to the business. So if you can't tell the story, then you're not going to get there. And in a consulting business, clients will eat you up. Because a lot of clients, if you're talking to people in an executive level, they don't care if you ran a logistic regression or a decision tree or an ensemble model or whatever it might be that you're running. They care about whether or not they're going to get something out of it. And how you communicate that is very critical. So to your point, I think that those are the biggest skills in terms of the hardest to acquire as well, I would say.
Super. I'm going to flip it around a bit and ask kind of a weird question, so we'll see which one of you wants to pick it up. What was your worst project you've done as an analytics consultant?
I got one.
Go ahead, Richard.
This is, can you all hear me? This is about 15 or 20 years ago. We were asked to build forecasting model, not a regular predictive model, to actually forecast at a point level what the actual outcome would be. And we took on that project, and in undertaking that project, what we didn't do was we did not manage the expectation of that customer, because he was looking at an error rate of plus or minus 2%. So that was one thing, was his expectation. Number two is that was not my area of expertise in terms of building forecasting models and using ARIMA techniques. I know that, but it's not my wheelhouse, right? So we were constantly, and I remember spending hours and hours and hours. I mean, we did finally get goodwill, but it was, I still remember that project, and I learned in terms of being, managing the expectations of clients and saying, okay, this is what you can expect to get, and these are the limitations. Or if I'm not equipped to do it, find somebody else who's got more experience than me. So yeah, that was a lesson learned for me, and that one still resonates in my head.
Anyone else want to take that one? I think I'm looking at everyone, and I think I'm the same. You just shudder with that question because there's always that project. Anyone else? Or?
Yeah, sure. I've got one. If nobody else, do you want to go? No. After 30 years, I've got a few. So this was a project for a very large printer manufacturer. We spent $800,000 US to take this project on. We came up with the model. We built a simulation tool on top of it, and we delivered the workshop to the client. They were starting to make their product decisions and so on, and we found an error in the code. Yes, of course, the QA process should have happened previous to this, but we missed something. And it was really wrong, not just a little bit wrong. It was really wrong, and the lesson I learned, we sat down, the leadership of the company. We're still a small company, about 25 people, still struggling to make $4 million a year, and this could have been a big hit to pay back that money or whatever would have been the legal proceedings. We decided to come clean and completely show them what was wrong and take them through it and so on. We got fired from the client, but we walked out with our heads held high. Lesson learned was QA is everything, and if you don't have an independent process that sets up in parallel to an engagement that's very large and very impactful to the client, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, sometimes you really have to be humble.
Yeah.
And say,
Swallow it.
yeah.
I think probably the worst project I ever worked on was a validation project. We were generating a set of tables that have to go to the regulator, and they have to be validated, and we have a database that was a terrible database. So we have independent groups doing validations, and I was involved in one of those. And the team didn't work well together. And it was the worst nightmare. The database was given to us in one format. When we were ready to run the final data, the database came in a different format. We couldn't run our programs. We had the pressure of time. All things that could go wrong went wrong. But what I learned from there is that the team of people that you work with could make your life miserable or could make your life bearable, especially in those hard situations.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up now, just see if there's any. I have a few more questions if no one can think of them, but is there someone in the audience who'd like to ask a question? No? Oh, we got one. Eric? So you
Terms and conditions.
and
Just it's got to be in the contract.
Yeah.
What the scope specifically is and what, in fact, you write in what's not in scope.
Documentation.
yeah.
As the project progresses, new things are discovered or unexpected circumstances and the scope just increases by circumstances. How do you deal with that with the client? Do you just tell the client that you need to money because these sort of conversation?
Well, that's 3 or 4 questions, but yes, the conversation is never easy, but if it's in writing, then you have all the recourse in the world to sit down with the client. It's also how the engagement with your client you've had over the course. Scope creep doesn't surprise people. Scope creep occurs if you are in the face and working with the client side by side on a regular basis. So we never walk away with data and then there's a big reveal 4 months later. That never happens, right? It's a weekly discussion, weekly thing. So in the end, it's all about discussion, transparency, and the contract is the contract.
In your experience, who is your normal counterpart within the client? So whom do you negotiate what when you go to a contract? Like which level, and do you have a multi-level negotiation? How do you normally do it in your practice?
Is that to me or to
Well, to anyone? Go ahead.
anybody?
Go ahead, Tom. Or Richard, go ahead.
Well, again, depending on the team that you're with, my situation, it might be the chief data scientist that I would be dealing with. If I'm working with with a marketer, then the market, we would be meeting the chief marketing officer. So usually you're trying to meet as high up the food chain as you can. That's your objective. That's not always the case, but in any case, you're always trying to, particularly in analytics, like the two key stakeholders is, you want the analytics person, and you want, like, particularly on the business and marketing, you want the marketing person. Now, I worked in the area of risk as well. So in risk, again, it's the chief analytics person, but then you're probably talking about somebody in underwriting or somebody in actuarial science that you're going to work with. So again, it depends on the project, but you have to identify. It's very, very critical that you identify the stakeholders, and I don't think there's one pat answer. Hopefully, it's the most senior person, but often enough, it's somebody mid-level.
I'm curious because, we have a range of different sizes of companies. So Tom, obviously you're with Deloitte, which is, going to be, I would think, more likely to be called into C-level. But Gillian, you're with a smaller consultancy, sort of known in Toronto, but not as much a household name. How do you guys connect with companies?
Most of our clients are marketing groups.
Yeah.
So same thing, CMO or somebody in like the SVP, VP side in a marketing team is usually who we would deal with. Sometimes there's an analytics group that's brought in as a stakeholder, but the negotiations are usually with the marketing folks.
Okay. And Fernando, yours is very technical, right?
Yes. I deal directly with either the director or VP of medical research or VP of engineering or director of engineering. And with them, we really cover the scope. And one of the things that we try to incorporate on all the clients, we have also a sentence, should in the course of this project, something unexpected happen that have to be enlarge the scope of the project, that will be a new contract. So that covers me for our company of trying to do something that we didn't sign for it. But also, I think it's help to manage expectations to the client, or was it included and what is not included. That I think is the managing of expectations is very important in maintaining the good client-consultant relationship. You don't want to overpromise, you don't want to underdeliver.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you for this. My question here is, like, we live in the age of data. Like, there are huge chunks of data on different islands. Like 30 years ago, the governments have most data about people, and they were doing these analytics or whatever. But nowadays, there's Google, there's Facebook, and these islands of data. I was wondering how we can reach something where we can actually connect all these islands to get better pictures and better analysis, specifically when it comes to analyzing people or analyzing, citizens or whatever, in a way that we don't invade people's privacy and we try to eliminate biases as much as we can.
Well, it's an interesting one, and I think since a number of you work in marketing, go for it.
I'll attempt that one, or at least the first part, maybe first. In terms of multiple data sources, oh man, that's my life every day. Is how do you take pieces of information coming from different formats, databases, whatever, and bringing it together. I think the best you can do is use the identifiers you have. It's hard to make those connections and keep things anonymous. So if you have different data sources from, I don't know, stuff from the web, and then transactional information, how are you going to make those connections unless your data is built in a fashion that's going to do that for you in the background? You probably are going to have to use some personal information to bring those together, whether it's account numbers or IP addresses or whatever. What I can say is when I'm doing the analytics myself, once all of that stuff is pieced together, then all of the, I guess, personally identifiable information is out of my view. Like I'm no longer looking at names or addresses, and max it's like a postal code or something like that. But yeah, you do the best you can with what you have. The best solution for companies is to build the infrastructure with that sort of thing in mind. Otherwise, you're going to be doing piecemeal regardless. I think everyone struggles with that. Maybe I'll let somebody else handle the
Sure.
bias stuff.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add it on the not the privacy side, but the bias. You had mentioned the bias, right? And I don't think there's a lot of attention paid to that. So if I'm, to your point, if you're taking all these identifiers and then I'm going in the web and I'm using email or some Twitter ID or whatever I can to connect, number one, presuming you're privacy compliant, the issue is one, okay, is this a biased group, right? Because again, if you're the Royal Bank who's got like oodles of information, that would be one of the first questions I'd be asking is if I'm going across all these disparate data sources, what kind of bias am I finding? And, there's analytics that needs to be done to try and identify that. So at least you can communicate to the stakeholders to say, this is what we're finding, right? And I don't think enough lip service is paid to that. It's just like, let's just append all the data together and like have thousands of variables without understanding, again, going back, the business problem and the biases that may be inherent in that.
I'll just add, I think it is actually a topic that's being discussed a lot right now with all the hype around AI, which is also known as advanced analytics and predictive modeling and all these other terms. But the bias, and I think there's a form of bias that is involved that is not in the data. It's in the head of the supervised person actually doing the work, right? So to a certain extent, even if you are in an environment where you're doing unsupervised learning, and unsupervised learning, the bias that's in the data, whatever you put in there, is inherent. So you have to do a lot of work to really make sure that the data sets you're putting in there are independent, are representative of whatever populations you're looking at, and so on. That's never gone away. Even in research sampling, it's been around for millennia. It's not new. What's new is the supervised learning models around neural networks and things like that. It's the operators whose biases need to be controlled for, and you just don't know, right? Because they're the ones telling what the inputs are and what the weights might be and so on and so on. In an automated environment, that might work itself out, but it's hard to know what that is.
Yeah, I've been reading recently an article that we have a big data set in the Genome Project, but it's very biased only to mostly Caucasian white individuals. And they're trying to extend, and you look at the database, it's humongous, but it's still a lot of biases. And the same thing happened, for example, in the police department in California, where a lot of the data that was in the database was data that was collected from the police that is already the over vigilant neighborhoods and not in the less vigilant neighborhoods. So these biases go undetected until somebody looks from outside and see what's going on. So the biases, as he mentioned, is something that people are starting to pay more attention on, and it's sometimes very difficult to figure out what is missing there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, great.
Hi, thanks very much for all these insightful comments. I come from a business background and marketing background, but for the last 6-7 years, I've been in the consulting space. So on the doing consulting for marketing research. So one of the interesting things that I've noticed, and Tom, you mentioned you started with marketing research, is how research, and now a lot is being said about the analytics and the power of analytics as it's developing. So how do you see the two either converging, morphing into something different? How do you see the future of these two together?
It's a great question. I've always had this view that market research or data collected in a custom fashion for study purposes is just another form of data. The tools we apply to drive insight out of that data is analytics. So there's no difference in my view. How they marry together is very interesting. So I'll use an example. Analytics on historical transaction data. If you're trying to look at a pricing problem, what's the elasticity of demand? Simple concept, right? Economics 101, everybody's done it, I'm sure here. Think about that. You're trying to calibrate a simple model of what's that price coefficient, but it's on historical data that's only moved between $1 and $2 for the last 5 years. And you're trying to say, wow, it's inelastic. What price can I go to? I can go $3, $4. Well, you can't really say, because outside the bounds of the sample, you're starting to really get into uncharted territory, right? So your model has never been sensitive. It's never been sensitized to that. That's where research comes in. Do you think about choice-based conjoint and discrete choice modeling techniques? They were designed to do that. They were designed to vary things beyond the scope of what's normal in a marketplace. So if you do price analysis for a series of products in a choice-based design, you can vary those pricing parameters outside those limits and test how consumers react to them. The marriage of those two things is very powerful. We used to call that data fusion back in the early 2000s, believe it or not. I mean, it's not new. So I look at this kind of data as just another form of data, and it provides insights that historical transaction time series data just can't provide. So it's the marriage of those two is really powerful.
Hi there. What would you say to someone who is very interested in data analytics, as I'm sure many of us in this room are, but isn't quite sure what area their skills could best be applied in, whether that be predictive analytics, marketing, or even using those skills for something like capital markets or other industries?
I don't know whether I'm going to answer your question. I'll take a stab at it. Because I teach at a number of institutions here in Toronto, and I'm often asked by sort of the same questions, like what, if I want to get started, the first question I get asked is, what language should I learn? Like, what programming language should I learn? And I kind of just say, you have to focus. The number one thing you have to do is focus on the process, the approach. And there's a process in data science and analytics in terms of like where the problem begins, right to implementation and measurement and all that other good stuff. And there's a process and approach that all of us go through. That's the bedrock of data science and analytics. I believe if you're going to go deeper, I think those people that are going to be the best hybrids are those that can be more technical. And I think, again, if you're really, really keen in this area, learn a language. Now people say, oh, should I learn Python? Like for me, like as long as that person knows how to code, I really don't care if they know how to code in an abacus at the end of the day. It's that they they understand how to code and the process, because they're going to be keen enough to learn a different language. But what they need to understand is the process, how to take a problem and work data all throughout the process, right up to the point where they implement and then begin to measurement. That's always what I emphasize. And again, if you can code, learn a language. Now, most of the kids are learning Python, but if you're learning SAS, I would hire somebody that's learning SAS, because if they say, well, if the client, if I'm working in the consulting business, the client wants to learn Python, I'm going to get that young kid to learn Python the way I learned SAS, because I was hungry back 30 years ago. I learned how to code, but they need to understand the process of how to work the data.
So thanks, the panel, for sharing your insights. The question I have is, in the analytics world, and based on your individual different experiences, what do you think is the number one challenge for each one of you? And what's your current strategy to actually handle those challenges? And what do you anticipate in the future in terms of the technology evolution to respond to those current challenges? And what will be different in the future? How our practice now will change in the future?
I think summarized as what keeps you up at night.
I'm retiring in 3 years, so I don't have to answer that question. No.
I think, and jump in here. I mean, I'm zeroing in on one question, which is, I think the technology is getting better and better in terms of getting at data. There's APIs. There's all kinds of tools. Like we have GitHub. We have code that you can use to run. But as the technology gets better, and I'm seeing it, you know, stuff that I used to have to code in SAS or R or Python, there are now tools out there like Alteryx, Sisense, where actually a person doesn't necessarily need to know how to code, but they need to understand the flow of how data works. And you hear the word citizen data scientist, right? And I think we're going to see a large growth in that area of people like citizen data scientists that know how to work with data. They don't necessarily need to know how to code. You're still going to need those coders, but what we're going to be seeing is a lot more empowerment of people that can use these new tools that allow someone to get at data without necessarily knowing the syntax of R, Python, SAS, whatever.
Jillian?
I totally agree with you, and I think kind of hand in hand with that will be the challenge around validation, and since, you know, data science and analytics will be sort of democratized among the masses, how do you sort of control the outputs and make sure that it's being done correctly and so on and so forth, whereas a lot of that is kind of managed now in more centralized groups, or in terms of data structure, IT, and that kind of thing. Whereas now there's, you know, data happening all over the place, people managing their own databases and data sources and doing their own analytics, and then you start having this these different groups maybe having competing results.
Can I add?
You can answer.
Just the first question was the biggest challenges. I think I haven't coded for a long time, so my biggest challenge in managing a practice is keeping people. I think it's an interesting time where, and I've gone through the last 10 years. Really, the same problem has existed, that data science has been evolving and evolving and evolving and been so important, and there wasn't these formal programs to teach data science. It was, you know, you came out of physics departments or stats departments or econometrics departments in our case, it just evolved. But now it's the formal programming is starting to supply people to the marketplace and so on. But the appetite now, and I think the appetite, digital is transforming organizations, so data is becoming more important. So the demand for that stuff is outstripping supply, and it's still doing it. So those who want, you asked the question about how to be, you know, where should I focus? Find a part of business, find a business topic that you like and apply analytics to it, right? Then you'll be fulfilled. If you like finance, go out and do that, but learn the analytical basis for what finance analytics is all about, or marketing, or supply chain. But I think that the biggest challenge we have in my practice is keeping people and keeping them engaged and interested, because they're early in their career and they're building, and as soon as they get those skill sets, they're gone. Mm-hmm. Right? And there's a stat out there that, and I'm going to say the M word, the millennials will change jobs way more than people like me who are boomers, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Dating myself. But it's true. They switch jobs more often because they can.
I think that one of the biggest challenges is to validate results. I think it's when I see the training that the students have, they rarely are exposed to a validation exercise. And for today's jobs, it's very important to be able to validate results. And now we are writing programs, and we are not validating programs, and we are reusing them. So this is a big challenge, require a lot of resources, but it's something that we need to keep an eye on that.
That's a good point. And I know I'm not on the panel, but I just feel I have to add into this. I feel like it kind of brings a couple of topics together. My worst project is also a project where a big mistake was made. And now, you know, when I'm working with someone younger, they're like, why do you check things so much? It's like, oh, pain, remembered pain. Like if you ever have to go to somebody and explain that this big thing that you just explained to them is completely wrong, you tend to not want to do it more than once. And, you know, to really validate a problem, you have to come at it with fresh eyes. So it either needs to be a new person, or it needs to be you basically walking away, clearing your head, and coming at it with a completely new angle, because otherwise you just won't see it. You won't see the problem because you're just going to see your own work, and that's it. So I totally agree. Yeah, another question here. By the way, I'd like to thank all of you guys for being so involved. This is a very engaged audience. Thank you.
Hello? Oh,
there you go.
So every client has their biases, right? And that might be questions they haven't thought to ask or assumptions that they don't want to doubt. But sometimes the data suggests something to solve their problem that has to challenge those assumptions. How do you have that conversation with the client? How do you make them break that way of thinking?
I'm going to tell you an anecdote. When I was working at the same group with Alison, we got to do analysis of a data from a large experiment. And I presented the results and said, this is a fantastic model. We have very good fit. We can do many predictions. And immediately the engineering stand up and say, Fernando, that could be a good statistical model, but doesn't match the physics reality of the problem. And I was like a cold water over my body, right? But then I started thinking about, look, all I did, I tried to fit the model that they proposed. The data didn't fit. And then I say, very simple, I challenge you to run the experiment for another 6 months to see if we got more data and see if it fits your model or fit my model better. And they decided to go with that. And what is interesting is the data for this particular experiment was a new phenomenon that they are observing from the physical point of view, that they have to develop a new theory for that. So two important lessons that I learned from there. First, whenever you get data, learn very carefully how people tend to look at the data and try to fit that. If it doesn't fit, then challenge. And sometimes you have to be patient. You have to have some credibility with the group for you to be taken seriously. And that takes with time, with experience, and with patience.
If I may add, I know years ago we were developing some pricing models for in the P&C area. And I remember like these models had to go to the regulators, to fiscal, for those of you that work in P&C. And I remember you had to get these variables approved by fiscal. And one of the variables was immigration at a postal code level. And I remember that was a no-no, that was a demographic. We could not use that variable. So basically what you're doing, you got to remember we're dealing with hundreds of other variables. So what you're doing as a data scientist is seeing if you could take that variable out and replace it with something else. Do I still get the same lift? Do I still get the same AUC curve? And then that way, you know, you satisfy the regulator concerns, but at the same time, you haven't compromised on the model because you've replaced it with something else. Now that doesn't answer, you know, what Fernando just said, but it is a different situation where you're being flexible to try and address something where the client is not very happy with the current solution. So, you know, the beauty of data science, as I said, is you have hundreds of variables to explore.
So I just looked at my watch, and crazily, it's actually time for us to wrap up. It went by very quickly. Thank you, everybody, for the thoughtful insights and for the thoughtful questions as well. I think our panelists will probably stay around for a few minutes after if people want to ask other questions, but we are going to try to sort of get out of here by 7:30 so that the RBC people can go home and go to bed. But thank you, everybody, so much, and especially the panel. Really appreciate your insights and thoughts on this. So, and hope to see everybody at some of our other seminars. Thank you.